This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. In the entire time that I've done this podcast, starting January 2012, I don't feel like I've made news. I feel like I've had the great opportunity to share insights, to bring great guests on, to get behind the scenes, to understand how it all works. But this podcast has not been about breaking news. But I really feel like my guest today breaks news on this podcast for the first time. Now, maybe this is not the case. Maybe the vast majority of Americans know what my guest will say today. Maybe they're well aware. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Now, perhaps what she's going to say today has been said many places. Perhaps she's said it in other places. I don't know. But for me, what she says was news. Like, wow, I did not know that. And I really have not had that feeling in this entire podcast. Now, of course, I've learned a ton. But that newsworthy kind of like factual point that really kind of shocks you, that happens today. My guest today is Jules Pieri. She is the founder of the Grommet, which is a marketplace for unique and novel, innovative ideas to unfold. Sort of bypasses the big chains, which for any of us who have ever thought about inventing, doing something different, Jules has figured out a way to help all of us closet inventors. Today we discuss her new book, How We Make Stuff Now, Turn Ideas into Products That Build Successful Businesses. Hey, if you're already dead, that's not going to inspire you. But if you still want the chance to do something different, to not only work for the man, my guest today, Jules Pieri, she has the insights. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So Jules, as I ponder this conversation, I think a good place to start would be not necessarily your very, very start on everything you've done in your adult life in terms of making and producing and thinking and entrepreneurship, but a particular start when you were at a company called Play School, makes toys. I remember it from when I was a kid. Those little characters and stuff, I still remember that stuff. But you would be there and you would have all these great ideas, and then you would get a no. You would get a no. Management would tell you no. I want you to tell that story in a little more detail and explain what the no was all about.
As you've already identified, Play School is one of the premier brands for infant and toddler toys. And I was there for a relatively short period of time, and I was noticing that our product line was shrinking fairly dramatically in my tenure. And more disturbingly, the no's that you referenced were coming from management regarding our brand new concepts, our new toys, our best new ideas that the R&D teams, the design teams are coming up with. And that didn't make sense to me because we were good at this and people were sincerely motivated to provide great new developmental toys for children. Yet we kept basically making the same old stuff. I went to my boss at the time and said, this doesn't make any sense. And my boss at the time is now famous, but at the time she was not. She's Meg Whitman, who subsequently ran eBay and Hewlett-Packard and even ran for governor of California. She was president of Play School. And I'd worked for her in 3 different companies. So this is my 3rd tour of duty with her. And she said, Jules, here's the deal. If Walmart, Kmart, Target, or Toys R Us don't want this new toy, we cannot make it. The reason was, as she explained to me, that until fairly recently, this was the late 90s, we had been successful in placing new toys, new concepts, all the risky stuff with the specialty local retailers who took on those new products. That was their lifeblood, to give them a go and more or less prove them out for the big guys. And it was too big a leap for those four big toy buyers at those four big retailers to take on unproven products. They were used to having a farm league, but the farm league was getting decimated by those four big players. So it was this virtual destruction circle, and it really pissed me off, basically. It kind of sat in the back of my head for a long time because it was just wrong that four individuals, as well motivated as they may have been, four toy buyers, would decide what infants, toddlers in our company would do together.
It's fascinating concentration of power. Can I ask, when you would you'd have these conversations with Meg and, oh gosh, here's the story, Jules, here's what's going on, here's why we're getting these no's. Did you ever get a chance to speak with the decision makers at these four other companies? And was there any cajoling, persuasion, any opportunity for that? Or was it just the wall?
That wouldn't have been my role, not even close to it. But yes, I'm quite sure that the sales team and, these would have been very carefully nurtured accounts with really strong executives on the play school side nurturing those accounts. They were so important. And yes, they would have certainly made the case for these new products. Here's the reality. It's not like these toy buyers were people with no vision or no interest in these toys. As individuals, they certainly had that. But in the scheme of three of those large retailers, toys, had a relatively limited role. And it was far more important to manage the risks. Like new toys, new products have risks. So you could put something on the shelf and displace something that was working with something that failed. And that marginal benefit of success was not worth the probably larger risk of a failure. So everybody focused on essentially repeating last year with a twist, slight updates, as well as increasing margin, because that was the whole point of concentration. The Walmart playbook for retail, which was so frankly exciting in the 80s into the 90s. It was a new way of thinking about things in retail to really focus not on, sort of the quality of the products or what the actual customer was going to get, but more so on managing costs and logistics by concentrating on a few suppliers and less product. That was exciting. And when I say exciting, I don't necessarily mean I liked it, but it was exciting. It was fresh thinking. Basically, most of retail took on that playbook, which was a very smart playbook, but it was smart till it wasn't. Because once everybody's doing the same thing, essentially competing on fewer products at lower price, it's a sea of sameness, and you lose the innovation. You lose half the reason you show up in a store for discovering new products or for discovering what's next or discovering what innovations have been created since your last visit.
I want to put a pin in you right there, and I want to take you back in time a little bit before we jump into how we make stuff now. Before we get into the Grommet, I want to take you back in time a little bit. And perhaps, because I think you probably have for sure a different background and went down a different path than I did. And I'm just curious because, when I hear phrases like industrial designer, or just design, if I think about the design of toys, this is kind of like one of these like Santa Claus dream type things that maybe you think about when you're a kid, but you don't really ever go down that path. You're like, oh, I got to do something serious. I got to go over here. But you were kind of in that headspace. How did you start to go down this path originally?
Well, it was like many things in life when you're young, fairly accidental. I had done a ton of fine arts in high school. So weaving, ceramics, drawing, that kind of thing. And never had any intention of pursuing a career in that area. It was just something I was kind of okay at and enjoyed. And I went to the University of Michigan. And I remember this so clearly as a freshman, put myself on an art diet because I had spent so much time on that in high school. Didn't take any art classes. And I liked what I called academic classes a lot, did fine in those, like those. But then I loosened up the chokehold on my art diet and took a sculpture class at the art school at Michigan. I was walking down the hall in the art school, and at eye level was this glass enclosed exhibit case that had a bunch of models of products that the industrial design students had created. They were small hand tools like drills and things like that. I stopped in my tracks and said, who does that? Who gets to do that? Because seeing those models, I knew it was this mashup of business, right? Nobody's going to let you design a drill that nobody wants to buy. No company will enable that. But the creativity of trying to find a hole in the market and creating a better drill or a better anything, I could see immediately without knowing the words, like who does this. That could be really interesting. I remember going to my sculpture professor and saying, what is that? Who does this? How can I do this? And therein started the path to create a portfolio and to apply for admission to the design portion of the art school there.
Let me also drill a little bit more and correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm curious how this was consciously, subconsciously, but your father was a toolmaker?
He was. And in fact, so funny you picked up on that.
You can send me the commission check. It'll be quite. I take wire payments and PayPal.
You do your homework. So tool makers, most people probably don't even know what they are, but my dad worked in one of the largest Ford Motor plants in the world. They made transmissions, and tool makers are the people who essentially create the parts, the tools that make the things the factory is responsible for. So it's almost like the molds, if you will, for different parts. And they also, in this case, in his plant, were the troubleshooters for when equipment broke down. They might have to make a part to fix that piece of equipment. It's a problem-solving type role and obviously requires really good spatial visual sense. Something, of course, as a kid, I had no idea what it was. But in that sculpture class, I sort of like fell off a turnip truck. This professor didn't know me. I'm in the class, and he came up to me one day and said, "You are really good at this. Like, what do your parents do?" My mom was a teller and then homemaker, and I said, "My dad's a tool maker." And that was the first moment I understood what he did almost, because the professor understood and he almost explained it to me. "Oh, that's why you're good at this. You got this from your dad." So yes, there was a genetic connection to my career. You know, my dad never went to college, and honestly, I don't think I ever even explained this to him. He would have loved this, right? To know that his genes kind of put me in position to do something I loved.
I think what's really interesting too, and if I take you back to kind of that play school time and ultimately leaving play school, and I want you to kind of tell the story of the founding of the Grommet. I mean, not the whole thing, but you can kind of give the overview. I was not familiar with it at all, and that doesn't mean anything because I'm just some crazy guy that happens to be in Asia at the moment. But obviously, you've touched and tapped into something that you call the maker culture, which is just fascinating because like I'm a guy sitting around right now and I've got this, like I've written 5 books and I've got a book idea in mind, but my book idea is full color, glossy pages. It's not something that the publishers are going to let me do off the shelf kind of thing, you know? So ultimately I've got to make the thing. I've got to figure out a way to make that thing. So as I was sitting there, I was sitting around thinking about talking with you today. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the lady that has kind of been going down this path for a long time. How does one take that something that you're imagining that you want to create? You don't really have the team to help you get there. You don't really know how to get there. You know what you want. You know it's cool. That's kind of somewhat how the Grommet came into being.
I told you kind of the lightning bolt awareness at play school of like, there's an opportunity here, or there's a wrong in the world that needs to be righted. That's really all I had at that moment. But a lot of things changed in the meantime, namely 2 really big things. One is, fast forward to just before I started the Grommet, folks were able to create physical products in a way that was completely unprecedented for very simple reasons. The technologies and tools to do so became cheap and accessible. Number 1, internet. Number 2, things like 3D printing, ultimately crowdfunding. Lots of reasons why people who previously maybe had to be more like me, working in a big company to have access to all those capabilities, could do it from their own office, their own profession, with no preparation necessarily to do it. So I could see, just before I started the Grommet, this forming, and that there would be this massive explosion of new products from unexpected sources, and little companies, we might talk about this in a bit, do a better job with new products than big companies in many ways. So they not just be new products, more of them, but better products. That was cool, right? But then I'm like thinking of my play school days, like, good luck. Where are these companies going to go with these products? Because it's probably, I was imagining it probably had only gotten worse. But here's what changed for me. So there's that external thing going on, nothing to do with me. I had recently been president of a social network, and we competed with LinkedIn and lost. You never heard of my company. It was called Ziggs, and it was sold to reputation.com. I was a pioneer in this industry of social media, and I had learned before any of my friends even knew those words or were joining Facebook or LinkedIn, how to create a community and what the power of that could be. And that's when the second lightning bolt was occurring. Okay, massive business opportunity to help new products get launched. It's the lifeblood of any company. It's interesting. It's worthy. But now I could see a route. Like, remember those 4 toy buyers? I could skip right over them, right? Take the products right to the people, the community I could imagine assembling. In our case, we started doing it from day one with almost like a little movie trailer. Like, we started creating a video for each product, which was completely unheard of 10 years ago. And we just started. We started marching, doing one new product a day since October 20th, 2008.
As you describe this, I'm thinking about, in the last 30 years, when we would see new and novel products. I'm not saying some of these were great. Some of these were probably not so great, but they would get a lot of attention on the late night infomercials. I can think of people like Ron Popeil selling some innovative idea, maybe it wasn't that great or whatever, or even most recently, the guy with the MyPillow thing. But I think there's a part of all of us that, when you've got that idea, even thinking back in time where you would see in the magazine ads, if you've got your invention, how we can help you. It's like you've kind of taken the modern social network, the modern community standards of the internet, combined with this age-old desire that so many people have to create and come up with something novel on their own.
Exactly. I love helping people realize their dreams. And one of the best things about an entrepreneur is you get to sort of create the world you want to live in, not just your own company, but the influence your company has. And that's what I feel like we're doing every day with enabling these arguably superior companies and products to get a fighting chance that they probably would not have without our help, or it'd be a heck of a lot harder. So yeah, it's great. And in my own experience, it's kind of funny. It's almost like last night I had a friend over who's a doctor, and I just had an operation on my thumb. So I have like this visible splint on my hand, and I could see she was like, let's not talk about your hand because I do this all day long. Like all day long, people come up to her with medical problems, and she was looking for an escape, and I wasn't interested in talking about my hand either. So it worked. But my experience is almost like that doctor when I would travel around the world. People, you're right, like 1 out of 2 people have a product idea or problem that they see. I happen to enjoy talking about it, so it's my job and I enjoy it. But it is more common than you might imagine.
Let's stay there for a moment and talk about, this is something near and dear to you as well, but the notion of great product ideas, where they come from. If I think about myself and I think about ideas that I've had, it's usually just being close to something. I'm seeing something, a particular type of content or an inspiration from somewhere, but it's something close to me personally. And the inspiration starts very close to home. It's not necessarily something way out in the distance. But why don't you speak to the notion, because you've got a lot of experience with a lot of different people on this big picture idea. And you look, as I ask this big open-ended question, you could probably talk for hours and hours and hours with numerous examples. You're welcome to fill in examples as you like, but let's talk about where great ideas come from.
Roughly, they fall into 2 sort of origin stories. One is a person who, as you identified, has a need in their life. They have an activity they do frequently or kind of a fail in something they enjoy, and they have this notion, this problem should be solved. This is an opportunity. I bet I'm not the only one. They're really starting from ground zero in terms of any preconceived ideas of how that problem will be solved, but they probably have pretty intimate knowledge of the problem. So that's one bucket, sort of maybe aficionados or potential users in a given space. And then the other bucket is more like a making connections bucket. Like they see a technology being used in one industry and imagine its application in another. So I'll give you an example of that. One of our most popular products would be a product called Peeps. It's this tiny little product about the size of a jackknife that has this little pincer. It's a little pincer in a case with these carbon fibers at the end of the two-headed pincer. It's for cleaning glasses, your sunglasses, your regular glasses. And the technology behind it is used for cleaning lenses in the NASA space station. You can't have cloths floating around. You can't have liquids floating around in space. So you have this carbon fibers that do this very high-tech job of keeping these incredible lenses clean. So this founder, Daniel Patton, he's out of Ohio, miniaturized that technology into this tiny $14.99 device that you can carry in your pocket or your purse or keep on your bedside. I probably personally own about 6 because I want them always near me because they work really well. You clean your glasses with this pincer, put it back in the case, and it kind of cleans and recharges itself. Super high tech, take it to a different level. And my own experience is that our grommet makers, that's what we call the people who create the products, only 10% of them have direct experience in the industry where they're going to work. 90% are coming from something completely unrelated. They're teachers, they're plumbers, they're doctors. And they, as I said, either see a problem that needs fixing, or because of their travels, they're aware of either a business model or a technology or something that they could import from one completely unrelated space to another.
I almost want to just sit here and say, okay, Jules, give me 10 more cool products I can buy because the first one you just described, I will now be buying.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sitting here wearing a pair of glasses that I know today that I had to spray with liquid, wipe down, the whole routine, and you just come up with this thing and say, Mike, you didn't know about this, did you? No, I didn't, so I will have to buy it.
You know, I see obviously all the products that we're going to launch, and at the very beginning of the company, we mildly worried, well, we've run out almost with all the good ideas sort of get played out. I can tell you, I knew after just a few months that would not be the case because even to this day, 10 years into it, I cannot believe when I see these things and they are so much better. And, everybody says, oh, I should have thought of that. Well, I would tell your listeners, if you think something should exist, and don't quickly assume somebody else did it, or don't quickly assume it's a bad idea because no one did, because it's just tip of the iceberg every day. There's so much more to be done. So to give you a few more examples, AirPods are a really popular product, and I didn't really want to own them because I was pretty sure I would lose them. They're so tiny, right? An inventor created basically a case, a silicone case with a little carabiner on it so that you can stick the Apple case right in this silicone case. Can't fall out. In my case, I clip it onto my little key hook in my purse. Never lost my AirPods. They're always where they should be. And even if I just stick them in my pocket, it's sort of a more grippy thing that's not going to fall out of wherever I stick it. Again, like really humble little product, not a massive innovation, but identifying a problem that was certain to get bigger. I was just at Harvard the other night with a bunch of entrepreneurs. They were asked to name their favorite product, and 2 of them named their nonstick fry pan. Like they just love their nonstick cookware. So I had to tell them, oh, wait a minute, you haven't lived until you have seen the Black Cube nonstick cookware. If you imagine a fry pan or a saute pan with almost like a silver honeycomb grid, tiny honeycomb grid on the cooking surface, in between that grid, very fine grid, is the nonstick surface. So it's protected by the grid that's right next to it. So it doesn't degrade, it doesn't break down. It works just as well as some of the older technologies that like Teflon that are nasty and people are staying away from now, with a fresher material, but also a great longevity. So again, like who knew? There have been a lot of innovations in this area, but this is yet another better one.
I want to go down some specifics of how we make stuff now in a moment, but I want to ask a big picture question because I'm seeing or I'm imagining the 900-pound gorilla over in the corner of the room. That when it comes to selling something online, it's hard not to think about Amazon. So I'm curious how Amazon plays a role in your world, if at all, right now.
This is what our makers tell us, that because their products are not something people expect to exist, you didn't expect Peeps, that eyeglass cleaner, carbon fiber eyeglass cleaner. You weren't going to just in your imagination go on Amazon and start searching for that. They kind of sort of suffer in kind of obscurity in Amazon because nobody's looking for them.
They're not made to be passionate on Amazon. There's no way to find the passion of the product and the maker on Amazon. You're just getting something you can buy if you already know about it.
Yeah, I call it search and destroy shopping. Like, you know what you want. This is a great place to go and, find it because it's likely to be there. But in the case of undiscovered products, new innovations, you don't know they exist. So nobody's looking for them, and they just kind of die on the vine or don't get a lot of traction on Amazon. So to succeed on Amazon, you really have to do a lot of the old-fashioned legwork of building awareness and building a brand in order to drive that search traffic on Amazon. So it's not a magic silver bullet to gain success on Amazon. I haven't really seen that happen without all the prior legwork, where then Amazon can kick in and fill some of the demand that, a company very expensively creates.
I can hear you as you describe a few products. I guess I hear a fun in your voice. This is fun to be around novel and new products all the time and to see something creative that one did not imagine. And then all of a sudden you pick it up and you're like, oh, this is really cool.
Everything leads back to people, though. And I think the fun for me is about helping those people who made the product, people who get to experience the product, because this was a big founding tenet for me, that our business would have a human quality to it. We have human judgment in helping to assess these products. We expose the makers of these products in our videos. And then after we launch something, the love letters we get on both sides from the makers: oh my God, I didn't have a business until you came along, or you gave me confidence to pursue this, or I got on Shark Tank because of you, or we get love letters every week. But then also the people who experience the products, they share them, they buy them, and they're excited too. They love to support small business. So we have a really special community. These are not give me the cheapest possible, I don't care about quality customer. These are curious, adventurous people. Many of them want to be great gift givers, and it's so wonderful to be able to give something to someone with a story, with a reason for being, and you have Grommet's assurance of quality, so it will be a successful gift for the person and they won't have it. So lots of reasons people are excited, but some of it's quantitatively even provable. So we sell these products, and like any company that sells online, we have returns, and I've watched our return rate since day one, fully expecting it to climb to normal levels. Normal levels in e-commerce would be, if you're selling apparel, it could be as high as 30%. Before the type of products we sell, it's more in the teens. People decide they didn't like something, it wasn't what they hoped it was, it's not the size they expected, the material's not good, it fails, whatever. So, people return a lot of products, and our return rates are always under 3%. There's no other company I know with a return rate so low. That's the type of quality and that's the type of satisfaction we create with these products.
This is because people can see in advance the whole story. They can feel the maker. They want to believe in it, and nobody's looking to do something funny. Maybe the way your model has been put together, you're kind of forcing people to really invest intellectually in what they're about to purchase, and they're making a commitment. And then when you get it, if it's something good, I don't think people want to play games. At least that's how I would read into it.
Absolutely true. That whole video storytelling heads off any disappointment because you know what you're getting. Secondly, like you said, there's sort of an emotional attachment to the purchase because you've thought about it more than just clicking a buy button. You've watched a video, you've read about this person, whatever connected you to it. So there's that. And then, just objectively, these products are high quality. We test everything. We look at 300 products a week and launch 6. The chances of it being a very high quality product obviously are nearly guaranteed when we put that much effort into it. Some people call this conscious capitalism or conscious purchases. And I think that's a pretty good term for the space we operate in. I have a term, trademark, that I like too, that's bigger than us, called citizen commerce. What that means to me is giving regular people the chance to shape the economy. So When you support a campaign on Indiegogo, you're doing that. You're saying, hey, I want to give you a chance. When you are participating on Grommet, whether sharing something or buying something, you're saying, hey, this is a company that represents my values or something I want to see succeed. So I'm gonna lay down my time or my dollars to make that happen.
I couldn't help but notice that one of your book blurbs was from Seth Godin, one of the greats in terms of the instant motivation. So, and I'm hearing that in your voice too, is that, you're really telling people like, hey, regardless of where you are in your current situation, you could be, at a cube at some corporation or at a job you're not happy with. There's a way to get outside that.
I mean, I think the only failure is not trying. I mean, I really do believe that. I've managed my own life to avoid regrets, and the only regrets I've ever had, and there aren't very many, are things I didn't do, not the things I did do. I see this book, I think you're right to sort of point to Seth Godin on this. Like he just sort of sets a higher bar for what you can expect for yourself. And obviously he gives in his own writing and speaking great insights and practical tips. And I think this book is meant to do that as well, to give people a roadmap and a path and lots of real life examples from ordinary people who've succeeded. I specifically even wrote the book to be super snackable, in that your current problem today may be how do you package this product, but tomorrow your problem is going to be maybe protecting your intellectual property. So you can read it in any order. It's totally actionable and useful in any order.
Let me keep you there for a moment, because you mentioned the IP and the packaging. I'm thinking about something almost in the middle, at least on my list here, the prototyping. I've got a bunch of friends that have made assorted things they've sold on Amazon, and I'm about a 3-hour flight away from Shenzhen, China, which I think is probably the prototyping capital of the world. You show up in Shenzhen and you find yourself in a factory and make something. I've not had a chance to experience it yet myself, but I would love for you to kind of maybe, just as a big, broad overview. And if we spend the rest of our time here, that's fine. But I think for those people out there that are feeling inspired, my gosh, okay, I could see myself being a maker. I've got an idea. But if you don't have that industrial design kind of hands-on ability to sit down and carve it out, it's a little daunting. So why don't you kind of walk people through the prototyping process as you see it, especially for people that might not have that dexterity to kind of sit down and do it. They might have the great idea, but they might not know who they need to align themselves with to get to from point A to point B.
So first of all, let me dispel the intimidation factor of the word prototyping, because actual real life designers start prototyping in the most crude way possible. You don't jump to the type of models I told you about in my Michigan art school hallway that look like real products or have some functionality. You start with foam or cardboard, or you cut up a shipping box. You do anything that makes your idea slightly visualized, because in the process of actually hacking something together with tape or glue and ordinary materials, you start to learn whether your idea is shaping up the way you had imagined it in your head. And there's no substitute for that. There's a quote in the book from the famous design firm IDEO, says that a single prototype, physical prototype, is worth 1,000 pictures. And it's so true, because the things in 3D might be better or worse or different than you expected, but they don't have to be slick. You almost want to take yourself back to like kindergarten when you made things out of toilet paper tubes and things. That's really where real designers start. We do not start with slick ideas executed, because here's why. If you start worrying about creating a beautiful prototype very quickly to convince everyone that this product's wonderful, your brain stops thinking. You're not creating anymore. You're just executing an idea that got frozen quickly. And your job with prototypes is to explore a whole bunch of different ways of solving the same problem over and over, iterating. Sir James Dyson of the vacuums is famous for this. I think he had 9,000 prototypes before he landed on his first commercial.
And he has such a great voice, though, too. That helps.
Yes, I wish I had that accent. I've got my plain old Detroit accent, and that's a good one. So I would dispel the notion that you actually have to have any skills at all to do a prototype. All you need is the desire to explore your idea in many, many different iterations. Obviously, at some point when you feel like you have something you can show people, and I'm talking about cardboard paper tube prototypes still, you start to use those really crude prototypes to get people to react to what you're doing. And they don't need something that looks like it's made out of plastic with electronics and buttons. They can react to how the shape of it interacts with their hand, or where they think the screen should be, or things like that. They really can give you great feedback. So that's also the way you get terrific market research.
Do you have anything that you might want to share where a maker demonstrated something to you that was rather crude in terms of the materials or appearance, but you got the idea and you knew the idea was brilliant immediately?
We don't physically see prototypes all that often in the office, so it's more in my entire career that I've seen that, and the discipline of training to be a designer. And yes, it's actually nearly always the case that if somebody has a pretty good idea, the quality prototype isn't going to hold it back. And I'll give you a couple of examples of one that's more in the early stage of prototyping, how a maker used prototypes, and then I can tell you about a more advanced prototype. Joelle is the maker of a product called Buttery, which is a covered butter dish. It turns out people love butter, and soft butter for many people is better than hard butter. She had seen butter sitting out on the counter of a friend, and she was a little horrified because she thought butter had to be refrigerated. Friend said, no, not true. So Joelle actually commissioned a local FDA lab to study butter sitting out and when does it degrade. And it turned out at 3 weeks in, one tiny particle of something hit the butter. So she sort of determined anything short of 3 weeks is proven to be okay. Then she realized needed a cover butter dish, right? Because you might not mind it sitting out, but you don't want it exposed. So she hacked together some prototypes that represented this, and I love the way she tests prototypes, and she still does this to this day. She lives in LA. Her family was headed to Kentucky for some family event. She told her family, I'm going to go to the airport early. She took her prototypes in a survey, and she went from gate to gate at the airport, at LAX, each group of people waiting for their flight. She would travel around from person to person, showing them her prototype, asking them to answer questions in a survey. Most importantly, she did not reveal she was the inventor because people would be too nice. She wanted the honest feedback. She would only tell them she was the inventor after they'd given her feedback. You have a continuous cycle of new people showing up in an airport. The gates fill with new people. People are bored. They almost feel offended if you don't come talk to them because you're talking to everyone else. So they really want to talk to you. So she still does this to this day when she has new prototypes to test with people, strangers. You definitely do not want the bias of your friends and family giving you your only feedback. You really need strangers. She was testing, what color would you like this to be in? And, do you believe this concept? And what would you pay? And do you like this shape? And that kind of thing. And she still does that to this day. Now she just buys the cheapest ticket she can get to get into the airport. She's not going to fly anywhere. She just goes and travels around the airport.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Right. But let me tell you about maybe a little bit more sophisticated prototype in that ultimately people do need to come up with a prototype that does represent the final idea that's going to happen along the way. And I want to tell you about Bonnie Tyler. She's in Connecticut. Her product is the Nag, as a very convenient little gadget to peel a single hard-boiled egg. She was running a business, which is a web design business, so nothing to do with creating a product. And she happened to be famous for deviled eggs and was headed to a party, but she was running late and basically failed, couldn't make the eggs. She was supposed to bring the deviled eggs. She couldn't make them. She only got partway through the peeling, and she brought potato chips. And she was frustrated, right? Because she wanted to do what she promised. So she started thinking, like, there are commercial businesses that require peeled hard-boiled eggs, and there's no way they have individual people peeling these eggs. How do they do it? She studied how commercial egg peelers do it, which is a combination of cold water, agitation, and friction, essentially in a drum, like little bumps on the inside of a drum of agitating a bunch of eggs. So she thought, I can miniaturize that. I can make that a very affordable little gadget. But I don't know how to get this done. She had drawings because she was a web person. She could at least get things somewhat realized in drawings, but I don't know how to actually prototype this. So Bonnie decides, and this is very available to many, many of your listeners, decides to go to her local library. Many of them have created maker studios, as have universities, public universities. They have the prototyping equipment, 3D printing and laser cutting equipment available to the public. And Bonnie realized this, that her local library had a 3D printing course she could take. Now, Bonnie is 76 years old, so she's taking
She's just a baby. She's a baby. She's just getting started.
It's actually true in her case. 76-year-old Bonnie shows up for the class to figure out how to print her neg, and the instructor walks in the room. And the instructor is 11 years old.
Yes.
Don't you love it? Long story short, Neg's super popular product. It's made in Connecticut, which is a bit unusual for an injection molded product. You're near Shenzhen, where, injection molded central. She's making it in Connecticut for a very affordable price. Started with that 11-year-old, though, prototyping.
That's a great story. I want to reach back to a few minutes ago and add a product placement for something, and I'm sure you've seen these, but you mentioned IDEO. And I do think that for every entrepreneur out there, every business person, those IDEO cards are so cool. It's just something nice to have. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Have you ever seen them? There's these IDEO cards. They're like a little bit bigger than a note card size. And it's just all these great little industrial ideas for design and stuff. And kind of like on one side of the card, it's giving you an explanation, the other side, an answer. They're just really fascinating. In terms of brainstorming, I will drop you an email if I can. I'll find the cover and share with you.
Actually, I haven't heard of that. That's interesting.
They've been around for 15 plus years. They're quite interesting. Hey, but beyond that, beyond my own little personal side tangent, in my limited time I have left with you, I want to take you down a path, something that, again, I've had a little bit of experience with. I've gotten a few trademarks. I've gotten the service mark and the official registered trademark. But, that process is really interesting because probably like a lot of people, I went down the path of, DIY, and I made a lot of mistakes early on. And then I ended up finding somebody who's got their law office right next to the patent office in Arlington, Virginia. And then that made it easy. But then the price tag was quite extensive. Why don't you speak to patents, trademarks, and some of the IP issues that makers are going to deal with? And perhaps there's an easier way to go about it than some of my trials and tribulations.
Unfortunately, this is actually one of the more treacherous areas in creating a product for two reasons. One is expense, and two is competition and counterfeiters. The expense is somewhat unavoidable. Unfortunately, I do think there are makers who go it alone. In fact, in my book, I refer them to a book that's a very helpful guide for figuring out how to at least get part of the way by yourself without, incurring the high hourly fees of an IP attorney. But many of them are just, this is just too important. They're going to invest too much in this, and they want to be as lock solid, ironclad protected as possible. So they will go the route of the professional protections and counsel. So I've seen it both ways, but it's an expense in either time or money, and there's no avoiding that, I would say, one way or the other. The thing that concerns me more, and this may not happen to you as much in more truly intellectual property as opposed to physical products, but we do have a world that's very dangerous for these companies because of
China.
Yes, but let's not blame the whole country. The actual culprits are not necessarily the Chinese entrepreneurs. In the case of consumer products, the culprit is actually Amazon, because 3 years ago, or 2015, 4 years ago, Amazon changed a really important rule on their platform that invited counterfeiters and gave them a way to succeed that wasn't previously possible. It used to be before then that a foreign company had to have a domestic agent representing their product on Amazon. And it was a bit of a barrier or filter to the counterfeiters and copycats coming in. And then Amazon, or Jeff Bezos in particular, got really worried about Alibaba and wanted to study them. So he decided to open up the platform to all international sellers on their marketplace. In particular, the Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese counterfeiters showed up. And today, 25% of what's sold on Amazon comes directly from China. And a vast majority of those products are copycat and counterfeit products that in an earlier world would have had to do the work to establish a brand and set up a distribution network with real retailers who tended not to want to work with those kind of companies because it would compromise their customer trust.
Can I probe you for a second really quick? Does this mean that if I go onto Amazon and I want to buy a new supply of underwear, my underwear is worn out, I need new underwear, and I know the particular brand that I want, does that mean that there's a chance that when I'm buying that brand on Amazon, it is a counterfeit brand of the real brand that I like?
Yeah, there's at least a 25% chance.
That's brutal. I had no idea. Does anyone have any idea of this?
I wish it were better known.
That's horrible.
It's the truth. I'm seeing it writ large through the experience of our makers. So Bonnie Tyler, the person I mentioned to you before, has found on Amazon her own picture, her own logo, pictures of her own product being slapped on packaging and photographed and put up in Amazon listings with a counterfeit product inside the box. The product doesn't have the features of her product. It doesn't work. It's being sold under her own name, including her own name, Bonnie, but the company name. And she's had to take 37 actions, different actions against counterfeiters. She doesn't sell on Amazon. Like she purposely doesn't sell there because it's a mess. So everything you would buy on Amazon that looks like an egg is fake, counterfeit, copycat, and they don't work. I mean, Amazon's not setting out to do this on purpose. Don't get me wrong. They don't want a business. I'm sure Jeff Bezos didn't necessarily expect this to happen, but the algorithms on Amazon prioritize the lowest price offering of anything. So if the egg is offered at $7.99 against its real price, which is I think $19.99, that counterfeiter is going to get the top listing in searches, and that counterfeiter is going to sell more than if Bonnie sold there, say, more than her real product. And all of her hard work, she says, this is what she says it's like. It's like standing outside your home and watching robbers go in and steal you blind. Because these $7.99 fakers are going to get all the sales. The product will fail. The customer will rightly blame Bonnie because they were duped. They thought Bonnie sold them the product. They thought it was a real neg, and she loses her business. This is what Amazon has done.
I'm assuming this is across the product spectrum.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now many of our makers do sell on Amazon, so they've exposed themselves to this. We try to head them off and try to explain to them, what the risks are. But it's totally across the product spectrum. And there are many quality brands like Birkenstock, Mercedes, Trek bikes. There are many brands who won't sell on Amazon because they're trying their best to tell their customers, if you see it on Amazon, you can be sure it doesn't come from us. Like a big brand can do that, whereas a little brand like Neg doesn't have that voice to say that to people. So, they might see Neg or hear about Neg, say in this podcast, and go search on Amazon. Who wouldn't? 50% of online searches start on Amazon. Find Neg, yay, I want to buy this product. I want to buy Peeps. Why not buy on Amazon? I have Prime.
You're really making the case for why your firm, the Grommet, and your book in particular are really finding a niche because, when you start to think about what's going on in Amazon, people aren't going to like this necessarily. And again, it's like you say, this doesn't make Jeff Bezos a bad guy. He's just created this platform. But, as you talk, I'm thinking to myself, hold on, if this is across the product spectrum, well, Amazon sells food now. I mean, you can buy whatever particular product you want, and I have. So do we have to run the risk of, if we think we're buying that bottle of ketchup with the Heinz label, that it might not be made by Heinz and it might have ingredients that are from who knows where? Is that a risk right now?
I wouldn't buy anything that goes on my body, in my body on Amazon. I wouldn't buy anything that a child has to use. You don't know what materials are used, what surfaces. Wouldn't buy anything for my pets. I wouldn't buy anything that is servicing motor oil for my car, that I might wreck my car. I mean, there's so much I would never Bye.
This is such an interesting insight. This is one of my most insightful podcasts. I mean, look, I always love my podcast, but to like literally be sitting here going, this is completely outside the envelope. No expectation you were ever going to say this, and no expectation that this is true. And I have no reason to doubt you. It makes perfect sense.
You know what you can do is, there's another podcast I love beyond yours, which is called Reply All, and they did a really good investigative piece on this. So you can find more than I've just told you on that podcast. It's a really good piece.
You know, I assume one way around this is if, for example, if I like Nike shoes and I don't want to buy them on Amazon, I can just go to the Nike website. That at least gives me some insurance that it's a Nike product made by Nike.
Yeah, you're safe if you go to the Nike website. If you go to a traditional retailer, credible retailer, they don't sell you counterfeit Nikes. So you go to Dick's Sporting Goods, or even better, go to your local sporting goods store, you'll be fine. You go, obviously on the Grommet, but we don't sell the whole world of products. I'm more or less directing your folks directly to the maker, directly to a credible retailer.
The book, How We Make Stuff Now, Turn Ideas into Products That Build Successful Businesses. Jules, very interesting stuff. I think I could, now that I kind of like open back the curtain a little, I think I could start going down all kinds of directions. And you finally be like, hey, Mike, I have to go back to work. Please stop. Where would you like to send people? What website can we send people? Amazon for the book. Where else can we send people?
Well, we have a website, How We Make Stuff Now. They can go straight to that and actually find all the sources for the books. We direct people how to buy it from an independent bookstore, buy it from Barnes & Noble, buy it from Amazon. You can buy wherever you like for the book. And then you can learn more about the book there too. I think there's a video of me talking about it there. So yeah, just send them there.
Very cool stuff. Jules, I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks, Mike. These were great questions.
They're all straight out of my crazy mind. If I took a picture of the piece of paper, the one piece of paper in front of me with my notes on it, you might go, hold on, should that guy be committed to somewhere? Where did the questions come from? It's kind of true. Anyways, but Jules, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate the time with you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.